Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech with your host, Elias. Man, I gotta say, I really am enjoying this season. You wanna know why? We've been having a lot of good new people. I say some of them even beating some of the old guests. And if I'm not reaching out to you as much, it's because they knock it out of the park. I mean, I'll reach out to you as a friend. I don't know, but my standards just get higher and higher and higher. Yeah, I may sound like a nice guy, but sometimes you turn off the camera, I could be a bit of an a-hole. And even sometimes when the recording happens, I don't care. It just pops up out of nowhere. Me being an a-hole. I mean, one of the episodes you might see by now is about me getting a little verbally aggressive with one of them because I don't know. He seemed too happy for my liking. As native New Yorkers, if you seem too happy, that's a bit offensive. And or I'm just gonna think you're kooky or crazy. We like the stoic. It's not that we're not mean. It's just we rough around the edges. We got to peel layers for that. That's a New York thing right there. All right, I know you didn't come here to hear my random New York monologue. Okay, I'm going to get straight to it. We're going to talk about interesting things here in this episode. I'm just going to warn you. It's going to get a little dicey because I'm going to say it again. I hate safe space. Safe space is stupid. Safe space are dumb. And I'm going to keep saying that again. And this is not new coming out of my mouth. Not new at all. All right. And we should have these conversations. We're grown people. We got, 21 is not the new 12. Okay. Just stop. You gotta learn to have conversations. The reason why people can't have these conversations because they're indoctrinated. They go to their echo chambers. Not just the left. The right got their own version as well. It's just that it's not as pronounced and it's not as recorded. I mean, you can even debate that fine. But let's introduce the guest here, and he calls himself the El Nino. Jose Alberto. Yes, I found the middle name. Yep. Nino. Okay. So before we start, what do you want the listeners and the viewers to know about you?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I have a podcast called El Nino Speaks where I interview a wide range of hosts across the political spectrum on issues that span geopolitics, culture, economics, and just in general, like American decline, among other issues. And I'm also a pretty prolific writer, and I'm an editor at Headline USA. I write for a host of outlets as well on those issues that I podcast about. I've been in the political game since 2007, and I went through a I was like a libertarian when I entered politics through Ron Paul's, former Congressman Ron Paul's two presidential campaigns to Republican in 2008 and 2012. Since then, I've become more of a kind of like non-denominational nationalist populist, if you will, become politically homeless because even though I started off as Republican, I have voted for politicians that were either libertarian, Republican, even Democrat on occasion. But nowadays, I tend to only vote in local elections because I've grown dissatisfied with the current political system and the choices that are being offered. So these days I tend to write from a very independent perspective that is very difficult to pigeonhole. And I like to keep it that way because I find that the current dichotomy you see, whether it's Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, or left versus right, I believe is defunct, and it's also very misleading. It doesn't allow us to analyze politics properly. And I think it's been my kind of goal to get people thinking beyond that.
No, I respect that goal because those labels, I mean, if I'm going to be nice, they're getting outdated. Okay. And I think even some of the discussions, I mean, I saw one. Now, I remember this. Actually, no, I'm not going to talk about it because it's going to get me off the rails. And I don't want to do that. I want to be more focused. Yes, listeners, I'm listening to you. I'll be a little more focused. Okay. You're happy? And it's not going to last forever, by the way. It's like a cheap Band-Aid. It's good for a day. The usefulness is going to come right off. Believe me, it's like a cheap Band-Aid. Yeah, you know what? Let's talk about the state of the two parties while we at it, because you gave me some that was very interesting. Yes, guests could give me sources. It's not a bad thing. And you know what? Because look, just because I'm a host doesn't mean I know everything. All right. I'm learning and I'm continuing to grow. And, and being politically involved is actually more important. If anything, I've been politically involved on several things, especially increasing voter rights for independence in New York. Big mission. We lost the battle, but we're going to continue. And now we got better strategies on how to tackle it. But, that's something I'm working on because, look, I like voter accessibility. Democrats say when it's convenient, if they really care about voter accessibility, they would have allowed open primary. Now, yeah, open primaries. Yeah, I don't care. I think for the general election, you can make that one a little close because independents are allowed to vote there anyway. So, but when it comes to the primaries, states like New York, New Jersey, they're very close. You either got to be a registered Democrat or Republican. You only can vote within your party. That's it. Okay. It's great we got early voting, but that's the fight that I've been doing. So I'm gonna keep it short. And I think a base of cash on hand. Ooh, the DNC got a lot more money. I'm gonna link the source, by the way. RNC has over 84 million and Democrats got nearly 14 million. You need money for American politics. This is
Oh
based on
yeah,
finances I learned.
100%. Yeah.
It just based on that alone, right? Without the people, the activists, all that good stuff, that
Yeah.
looks craptastic. Yes, that's an old thing I'm going to use again. Aging myself as a millennial, that is bad. That is
Yeah, I mean,
horrendous.
I can speak from experience as well. One reason why I firmly believe that the US political system does not care about like the will of the everyday voter is because it's become oligarchic. The system we have is an oligarchy. And what happens is that to run an average congressional campaign, because I grew up in Texas, in like say like Texas, regardless of what party you're in, it's gonna be a seven-figure affair at minimum. You have to be able to raise like minimum like 1 to 2 million. I'm talking a congressional seat. That's just for the House. The Senate, you're looking at in the tens of millions, possibly nowadays, especially in a decade from now, it's probably gonna be in the hundreds, in the low hundreds of millions. And like gubernatorial situations, the same. Because of this, favors either rich people, like people that can self finance their campaigns, or people that are willing to kiss the feet of oligarchical donors. And this prevents it immediately filters out the interests of labor unions, people of like modest means, and any other group that doesn't have deep pockets. And that's why people always complain, whether it's people on the so-called MAGA right or people like in the Bernie sphere on the left, the Democrat sphere, that complain that they don't get like any of like the measures they want. And it's actually, as an uncomfortable truth is that the political class that you have that's supposedly representing you, it's actually not representing you. It's representing a donor class or corporate interests because of the way the system is structured now, where it is practically impossible to run for office at the federal level um because it's cost prohibitive. You have to have like very minimum, maybe high six figures, but you're probably have to have like a war campaign war chest that's in the low millions. And even at the state level, it's still a bit accessible, but in some states as well that are electorally important, that trend is also taking place. And the system has become very alienating to people as a result.
Yep. This is why I agree when the progressives say this, but not just for the progressives' sake, but for all Americans' sake. Yeah, if we could get rid of money out of politics, get rid of dark money, I'm all for it because of that alienation that you mentioned. I mean, you're not the first guest to say that, but people get your head out, get your head out of the sand. This is a major obstacle, especially for some elections that you got to do, especially if you run. I give respect to you if you run, even if you lose miserably. I give respect to you because you're trying to challenge the system. Well, that's the obstacle you have to deal with. People with big pockets, they pick someone who will lick their feet. Say, okay, you'll serve my interests. Okay, I'm gonna give you 100,000, and then I'll spend another money on throwing negative ad campaigns against the one who wants to fight for the people, through PACs and all that good stuff, and this is just, I give shout out to Jeff Ward, even though he ran state and local elections, but a lot of this applies to the federal. I think if anything more egregiously, I think that's the only difference. That's why Washington D.C. they said that's for the elite, and I agree. I mean, you just gotta pay attention. It doesn't take a genius to figure these things out. Pay
No,
attention and stop being in your little social media ecosystem or bubble. Okay, or for the older audience, stop being brainwashed by cable.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
that's what I'm going to say about that. We talked about the money on both the DNC and the RNC, and I mean the only thing I'm going to add for the Democrat side is we don't see a clear leader or frontliner. Even though, to Gavin Newsom's credit, if you will, that he's trying to be the front runner by trying to out troll Trump through social media, has gained a bit of attention in polls. He got a boost on that, but how long that's going to last? Is that going to carry over? Is that going to translate to a 2028 victory? I doubt it. You have to be a lot more than a social media troll.
yeah. I'd also add that the state of California, it's in a pretty bad shape, and having Newsom at the helm, it's going to be very easy to attack. And if Republicans are smart, they can easily just point to that, because California has just become like very unaffordable. They've had tons of trouble setting up like a basic light rail system, like statewide light rail system, and has very high taxes, and a lot of people are leaving the state too. And the problem with guys like Newsom is I see them as part of as just the so-called left wing of the oligarchical class that's in control there. And the issue I feel with the current system is that it needs people that are like truly outside that whole paradigm, because Democrats and Republicans like they have their own unique set of problems. For one thing, I grew up in Texas and was very involved in the Republican Party there, and my issue with them has always been that the Republican Party, since the Ronald Reagan revolution, has just been slavishly devoted to high finance and big corporations, especially the latter. And as a result, like Republicans will boast about, oh, we just got all these Californians flocking to our state, because obviously California policies have failed. Unfortunately, Republicans are creating their own set of problems now, that like with all these people fleeing to red states, these red states are starting to become very unaffordable, and they're also becoming too welcoming of these mega corporations that have very questionable corporate practices. So you're just repeating the same old cycle, because there was one point where people were moving to California en masse in the earlier 20th century, and also places like New York, for example. But now the issue I feel in United States is that people are too married to the idea of the gross domestic product, the GDP, and economic growth, as opposed to like policies that promote like stable family formation, social bonds, and like labor power and workers' rights and all of that. I just find that there's not many answers on either side of the aisle, unfortunately.
Yeah, you point out something that I've even alluded to several times. We are too focused on money, and to the point that we are just neglecting all the other issues, like you said, the social issues, workers' rights. I agree. I'm not going to argue against that. We've been hyper focused on just gross domestic product, screw everything else, and I've seen that with the Republic. I mean, even Florida is another example. I think certain parts of it has become unaffordable because a lot of people flock there from New York in particular.
Oh,
To
100%. Yeah.
the same thing you say about California, Texas. It's a similar
It's
situation.
across the Sun Belt red
Yeah.
states. That's a dynamic. The problem I think here, see, this is what I critique a lot of Republicans about, is that their policies, um if you have like the right connections and you have the right university degree, it's good for the individual. Like that's actually undeniable. If you're a part of like, if you're a striver that wants to get their money, it's really good from a selfish standpoint. But from a community standpoint, whether it's actually not that good, because the current economic system in the United States, it favors parasitism. It favors the parasite as opposed to like the producer or the person or like the worker. Ultimately, it favors like we have like a highly financialized economic system that honestly functions more like a casino. And like people should be able to get their money, but it needs to be like sustainable. You don't want to be living in like a system where it feels like you're in a constant rat race where if like your paycheck grows, but then you start realizing your food costs, your housing costs, and everything else starts growing. And yeah, as you mentioned with Florida, you're seeing the same issue as well, like in Texas, where yeah, you're getting a lot of economic activity, but everything's getting unaffordable. The housing's getting unaffordable, a lot of other stuff. And um it's a hamster wheel economy at the end of the day.
Oh no, I agree. I love that now. I love that. It's run like a casino. Yep. Just take your money. That's how the casinos make money, right? Gamble, gamble, gamble. You have a whole lot of losers and a very few winners. I mean, that's how they sustain themselves. I mean, just do simple math, people. You can just do on the scale of a million, a billion, a trillion, whatever. You need to have a lot of losers. Does it have that, sustain? That's how the
Yeah,
casino makes his money. I mean, that's just basic mathematics. And look, and I suck at math, people. So,
yeah, yeah.
after a lot of losers, they keep some of that profit. Okay, we're gonna give one. Okay, we make a billion. Probably gonna give a million to this winner and this winner and that
Those
winner,
are the
and that's
success
it.
stories they want you to like fixate about, but in reality, that's like it's a crapshoot where like for every success like people will boast about, there's at least like 5,000 other failures. That's what they don't want to tell you. That's what the system does not want to tell you. That's the whole American dream mythos now, where um that's what keeps the system going. It's the illusion that you'll be like prosperous, you'll hit the jackpot. But in reality, for every person that hits the jackpot, you can find like 10,000 others that do not make it.
Yeah, I mean, doing basic math, you could debunk that illusion. Forget politics, forget all of that. Just do basic math.
Just
I mean,
yeah, look at
yeah,
trends, look at the numbers, and look at trends.
yeah.
If you do that, like ignore the my big thing is ignore the noise and look at the signals. The signals are in the economic studies that you see in Pew Research, Gallup, and a lot of think tanks that show like these numbers, these trends, and all that. When you look at those trends, you start to realize the system is actually like screwed. It's rigged against you. Like going back to the casino, the house always wins.
Exactly. People in the comment section, you want to argue against the house always wins? Go right ahead. Show your stupidity. I'm all for it. But just remember, YouTube will cancel you. Rumble, not so much. It'll eventually hit Rumble. Maybe a week or two later after it's released on YouTube. Then you can shout crazy. You call me whatever stupid name. I'm just gonna laugh. I've been called names before, and I'm perfectly okay. All right. It reflects on you, not me. All right. I'm just trying to give you stuff, make you informative, and sometimes uncomfortable to make you informed because it's going to challenge your little bubble. And, I don't care. I'm like that naughty kid likes to poke in the bubble, and I enjoy it. I get a kick out of it. Like, I enjoy popping a bubble. Echo chamber, stupid think tank. I enjoy doing that personally. I get a kick out of it. That's why I just keep doing it. It's a little dopamine hit for me. I know it's like an addict, but it's the truth. I get a little kick out of boop. Challenge your thinking because I want you to do better. In a weird way, I kind of care. Even though my methods could be harsh sometimes, trolling sometimes, but at the end of the day, you need to be informed, people. I believe in informing, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it means touching the controversial stuff. All right. So enough about that. So the Republicans, don't I'm gonna say, even though they've been winning, they do dominate. I think, especially state. I think there's more Republican states than blue states, if I'm going
Yeah.
to be honest, like by a little bit. I think it's like two or three more, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and that's going to matter, and that matters. All right, especially in some of the races, especially when it comes to the, what is this thing called? Oh, the Convention of States. Yeah,
Mm.
where they change, ratify things in the federal level, especially pushing a new amendment. You need 75% of the country. That equates to 38 states. So you're going to have to go through the blue hurdle one way or another, especially if it's a policy perceived to favor the right. Let's just say perceived. It might not be, it doesn't matter, but once people perceive or think that way, they're gonna be antagonistic or they're gonna be supportive. Some voters are informed and some voters are just not informed. I believe in informing the voter, and that's what we need to do. So how the Republicans are, I don't think they're not doing that great because they got a thin majority in both the House and the Senate, even though they got a lot of, the war chest is pretty good, but it's gonna take definitely a lot more than a war chest just to win, right? You need like persuasive voices, you need campaign
Mhm.
strategies. I mean, what say you?
Yeah. So the thin majorities, yeah, you notice this especially in the House, and even with these states, even though Republicans do have advantages in terms of the states controlled, they'll never be able to like have like full domination of state governments in the US. The country is just too polarized, and the polarization is what's by design, because that's what creates these thin majorities which make the country absolutely ungovernable. And even independent researchers have noticed this since the end of the Cold War, 1991, as a reference point, dissolution of the Soviet Union. The US has actually not been able to pass many reforms that have like benefited working class Americans. You could argue maybe Obamacare, and even that's a stretch because I personally don't think that even addresses like the root causes of like a lot of the healthcare issues, but like the US doesn't really pass a lot of laws that benefit workers. When it does pass laws, it's generally to serve oligarchical interests, whether it's like increasing funding for the military, defending Zionist interests abroad, or passing laws that benefit the financial class and all that. The US political system is not responsive. And with regards to the Republican role, with how the advantage they have, the thing is, Democrats pursue a lot of unpopular policies, like some of like the woke stuff, or even they sometimes also pursue a lot of pro finance policies as well, because the financial institutions have sunk their fangs into both parties. And as a result, you create this very predictable cycle every 10 to 12 years where people will vote the bums out, and then like they'll elect like say like the Democrats, like in the Obama era, they actually like were pretty dominant. And then after like 8 years or so, Democrats become unpopular, and Republicans get in office, and then they're in power for a bit, and then like they become unpopular and they get voted out, rinse, lather, repeat. And that's whole system, this artificial polarization, it's a feature, not a bug, of the present political order, because oligarchs want you to be like arguing about like the latest Sydney Sweeney ad and other outrages of the week, because they don't want you to talk about how like the whole system is hyper financialized. They don't want you to talk about how people are getting micro loans just to buy like pizzas and stuff and all this stuff. And then they don't want you to talk about how it's like impossible for people to buy like their first house or start a family and all of that because of how expensive everything is getting. And that's like the system's neatest trick, is artificial polarization.
Yeah, I have noticed that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna argue against that because it's true. Yeah, they got what, one cycle is Democrats, great, Republicans suck, and the next cycle is vice versa. It keeps going and going and going. It's like a wind swiper. Up to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right.
It's like that, like a pendulum as well.
Like a
Yeah.
pet, yeah. That's an analogy. I'm sure I
Yeah.
use a nice little pendulum swing. I think like a medieval thing that swings like that, but it fits. It's very applicable. So I'm not gonna argue against that. I mean, you get it's a cycle, people, that's
Oh,
been
it's cycle. Yeah, it's
manufactured.
cyclical. Yep.
So that's the main point, and just make sure especially those of you who are politically brainwashed, join this MAGA wave while you can. It's going to eventually go back to the Democrats. Boom. At some point, and vice versa. So there's some highs and lows of both of y'all. Even though I think y'all both silly, to be honest. But hey,
Yeah.
that's just an independent guy just talking to the mic and a couple of well-informed people. Okay, so even though the Republicans are winning, I just think they're not at the supreme advantage, even though some of them project
No.
that. I was like, nah, if you look at the numbers, it's like barely 51 here, 55% here. I said,
Yeah.
well, Democrats could easily flip that if you continue to, push on popular stuff, which they're gonna do anyways, because they want to, benefit the financiers and the oligarchy, and a lot
Big
of the
time.
left have said that. Like I said, kissing the feet. I mean, that's true. If you want easy campaign money, I'm going to support. Let's use the APAC, a very good one, a very prominent example. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm pro-Israel. Israel has the right to exist and defend itself. The reason why they bomb is because they want to make sure to kill the Hamas people, even though a lot of innocents have died along the way. That's the truth. A lot of needless bloodshed. Let's be honest. I know I'm going to be called anti-Semite. I don't care. I never said blow up. I never say destroy the Jewish states. I know they got the right to exist too. Two-state solution. I want it to be a possibility. That's supposed to be the American official position, but look where the money is at. We overwhelmingly fund Israel's military, so we gotta look where the money. Just like you said, that's the noise. What we say, what we do is a different thing. And we have gave a lot of money. We have given a lot of money to Israel to continue to engage in this conflict, done a lot of damage to Gaza. And don't get me wrong, Jews should not have been killed either. October 7th was completely wrong. I can argue against that. That's just terrorists. It was barbaric. It was filthy. I could, but fight fire with more fire. Not the right way either. I mean, I think this two-state solution should happen, but what's your insight on Israel? That many people, for those who are just uninitiated, the obvious, and maybe there could be things that we are not aware of about the Israel-Hamas conflict.
I think that conflict is inevitable because of the simple fact that Israel is a Jewish supremacist state that is firmly backed by the United States government and its toadies in Europe, NATO, and all these institutions, and that this is a state that's based on ethnic cleansing and domination of the indigenous Palestinian people that have lived there for multiple generations, if not centuries, on those lands. And I've long argued that yes, that the U.S. should be defunding Israel, cutting off military aid, economic aid, and stop giving it diplomatic cover and move to some type of arrangement, whether it's like a two-state solution or whatever. But that ultimately I think the US cannot be complicit in this basically like what is a mass ethnic cleansing campaign right now that's taking place in Gaza, and it's going to eventually go to the West Bank as well. And that a two-state solution is fine, but I believe that ultimately the biggest enabler of this conflict has been the United States government and the many institutions from nonprofit organizations, the media, financial institutions, that continue to parrot this pro-Zionist Jewish supremacist line that Israel has to dominate this not just the Palestinians but also the broader Middle East, and our foreign policy in the Middle East basically serves Israeli interests and doesn't take into account actual American interests, which I argue should be to go away from the Middle East and focus more at home, and if not like really like the Western hemisphere. But the problem I see with a lot of people is that they are very much wedded into the notions, the very limited window of acceptable opinion about this conflict, where these pro-Zionist forces try to stifle any dissent. And I think it's very important to understand the history of like the Jewish state and its formation and its continued oppression of Palestinians, and its also disproportionate influence over US politics. If you want to understand how to solve this problem altogether, which I believe requires non-interventionism and the US government just getting out of the Middle East and stop picking favorites there altogether.
I know for those of you who are pro-Jewish state might be ruffled and offended by it. There's a comment section. Express how this host is allowing to platform this guy or how crazy he is. Just Put in the comment section. But remember, if you're on YouTube, it's like a landmine. You touch a certain spot, you're done. But where it's gonna go to Rumble, ironically, I hate using this term. It's kind of like a safe space in a sense because you're not gonna deal with that kind of censorship like YouTube. Let's be brutally
Yeah,
honest.
it's a
So
sanctuary.
I put it on Rumble where you could say that this host is crazy or Jose is somehow anti-Semite. Well, that's not anti-Semite. He's just stating facts and analysis for what it is. Anti-Semite is like saying all Jewish people got a funny nose. So that's anti-Semitic. All right, that's an example of real anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Just stop using this word broadly. This is the similar crap that I've criticized, the cancel culture nonsense, the woke nonsense. You gotta speak a certain way. Piss off. Don't tell me how to talk. Those are these dumb young college kids I don't know life trying to tell me how to talk. I have a lot more life experience than you, bro. Do you even know what hardship is? No, you don't. All you now do is shout like a freaking child. You haven't grown up. Go through trials, and then I respect you. There's some young people that have, and I respect those. But those of you just go to college campuses, just shout nonsense because you just hate it. No, that you're a child. I don't respect you. Okay? And that does come from one camp more than the other. We know which one is which, listeners and viewers. All right. So um I had to get that out. And I mean anything else you want to add to the Israel and the Hamas thing? Because I that analysis is actually profound.
The issue here is that it's not like a question of whether one supports like a Palestinian state or like or like a Jewish state. Really, I'd say like if you want to have like a Jewish state, go ahead and marshal your resources, your independent resources, and all of that, but don't rely on the U.S. government to constantly subsidize and provide arms to your state and provide it diplomatic cover. The United Nations, like assume the consequences of your domestic and geopolitical actions against the Palestinians and the broader Middle East, because that's how like any like truly sovereign state would function. And yeah, with regards to like the Hamas conflict, Hamas is just the latest iteration of resistance that Israel's going to face because of the fact that they engage in ethnic cleansing and dispossession of Palestinian people, and it's naive to think that they're not going to face pushback no matter how nasty that pushback could be. Like the nature of building states and civilizations is actually historically a really bloody affair, and like almost a lot of states are based on that, on some type of supremacy. My issue with it is that like we see excessive Zionist control of US politics, media, and as a result we are constantly on the hook both financially and in terms of military obligations to advancing Israeli interests in the Middle East. And I think that's not like acceptable, especially if the US wants to be like a self-respecting country that promotes human rights and national sovereignty.
Well said right there. Well said. Well, I got nothing else to add because I'll be regurgitating, and I don't like to regurgitate unless I think it's too damn important. Well, let the media regurgitate. I know there's a lot of people talking about this, so I want to save my breath and just switch to Ukraine. That's another one that we got our issues. And let me just say this real quick, just reiterate one point. The Dems are split with Israel. Republicans are more split with Ukraine. Anything else you want to add for the Ukraine and all of that? Me, I've been like a mix. I say, yeah, I don't think we should have been involved with Ukraine, but what if we weren't? I'm a little iffy on that one. I never had a clear stance on that one.
I've always been of the opinion that, like I've said before, the U.S. foreign policy needs to be more focused on the Western Hemisphere and domestic affairs. Russia, Ukraine, in my opinion, has the product of the U.S. Expanding NATO and also just broader influence in territories across Eastern Europe that have that Russia historically has either dominated or tried to like maintain a sphere of influence. And spheres of influence are pretty much a natural part of geopolitics. The United States has always had a sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere, from Mexico all the way down to South America. It's the Monroe Doctrine, where the tacit agreement was that the US would not interfere in the affairs of European powers in the 19th century, so long as those European powers would not interfere in the affairs of Latin American countries or countries in the Western Hemisphere. That's a good compromise. But the US is a global imperium now. It's an empire that's globally that wants to have its influence everywhere. And as a result, it's going to cause conflicts, whether it's with Russia in Eastern Europe, Iran in the Middle East, or China increasingly in East Asia. And I've always been against these type of endeavors because I think they only breed conflict. They become a huge boon for the military industrial complex and the nonprofit or organization sphere that's always trying to launch regime change operations in these areas. And I'm against that. I think that we need to start thinking more in the interior because we have a ton of problems. And I don't want these parasitic entities, whether they're defense contractors or these NGO regime change agents continuing to live off of the taxpayer dime or just siphoning resources, productive resources from the American population.
You know what? That's an easy arg. You know what? I could agree with that because we do got a crap ton of problems domestically. You already said about food costs, housing costs. I mean, we could go through a long list of problems here. America internally is being neglected because of these geopolitical interests. I mean, who could argue against that? That's not a left wing and right wing talking point. I think that's a clear, most objective analysis. Without getting to the nitty gritties of each of them. Me. Now I'm more towards. I wish we shouldn't have conflict with Ukraine, and I guess we expanded the NATO influence too much. I did look into that. So I say during the Obama terms, we was getting 3 countries in Eastern Europe, and that really. Not to say Russia, it's a good guy or anything, but that
Yeah.
caused them to be outraged. It's like, you know what? I'm going to start the war. Screw it. Not saying it's right. It's just cause and effect kind of thing.
Yeah. Geopolitics is not about right or wrong. It's more about what is and what is not. You have to like look at it value free and how states objectively act to advance their interests. Because when you start like going into moralizing about geopolitics, it will lead you down a road where your instinct is to like intervene everywhere, and like let's face it, US has very limited resources, got its own host of problems domestically, and we just don't have that. I also think it's really none of our business. I take it I still have like a vestigial libertarian tendency where I just think that the US shouldn't be interfering in the affairs of foreign countries, period. Yeah.
Hey, look, I don't mind libertarian. This is one of the things I'm agreeing with more libertarians on, believe it or not. Before, I'm going to be honest, I thought this was a crazy third party that I would never agree with them almost anything. Listen to them more carefully, giving them a fair shot, which initially I didn't. I was like, yeah, a little too crazy. I'd rather deal with, these other two established parties. No, when it comes to war, I think the libertarian camp is winning me over. It just makes the most sense. It makes the most sense. I just think if you're going to fight a war, it has to be based on sadly interest. I mean, I wish it was on morality, but let's be real. All nations got its own interests, and they make decisions based on what they think is best for their government and their people. It's as simple as that. Reason why some alliances last longer, it's not because they like each other. It's because of similar interests. Hold on, no, nothing creates an alliance like a common enemy. Nothing creates an alliance faster than a common enemy. Okay, I'm just gonna keep saying that because that is true even in geopolitics. A lot of them see, let's just use this. I want to use this lazy example. Russia's a common enemy. You create alliances because a lot of them don't like Russia. They see Russia as a threat, or China, Iran, well, North Korea. North Korea's been they kind of obscured to the background recently. I would say for
Yeah.
years now. I think ever since the COVID thing, North Korea is irrelevant when it comes to current events for the most part. Unless you dig deep to the sites that will focus on that. This is great. This is great stuff I'm hearing. Is it groundbreaking? Sometimes I think sometimes we should be reminded about what is instead of what's right and what's wrong. It's just wrong to invade a nation, period, but it's true. All civilizations are built in bloodshed. It's true. Even America.
Yeah.
I mean, while digging deep, the American Revolution, very bloody. Without digging too deep, you can even dig deeper for the other conflicts. But that was a big one. Okay, a lot of people died. All right. I mean, yeah, a lot of nations, it was based on tribal warfare and all of that. Go to any continent, Asian countries, African countries, South American countries, and and sometimes a foreign invader, the colonists. You could add that in there as well as a common theme. This is how they all formed. I wish they didn't. I'm going to use my little naive, innocent hat, a little bit of innocence I got left. But, people are going to do what they need to do. So create civilizations based on economic interest or for control, what have you. Sadly, that's the flawed part of the human condition. And unless we don't change that, I think if we change that, I think we're no longer human. Unless all of us become dig into spirituality, I think that's the only way that's going to be cured. Maybe, and that's maybe. But I think that's the best solution I could think of so far. Hopefully, something better comes along the way. Talking about that, can we prevent a World War III, or is it just too late?
Ooh, that was a tough question. Yeah, in theory, yes. If you get the right people, not just elected, but also in like the advisory roles in the government, like for foreign policy, um, you can prevent it. But um, it seems like things are definitely coming to a head. But at the same time, the US is facing a lot of problems, even with its military industrial base, which is actually kind of ironic because despite how much money it spends on it, they're getting issues with like basic like missile defense shortages. Like for example, during the Iran Israel conflict, one of the reasons Israel had to like set up a ceasefire with Iran was that the US's like missile interceptor systems were actually being depleted to the point where they could not like really adequately supply them, because also they're providing a lot of these systems of missile defense to Ukraine. So there's like a big military industrial complex type of crisis happening in the US, and that might actually ironically prevent it from getting into World War III. But the US still has a vast amount of resources, so you can never put it past the parasites ruling over us to try to pull that off. But things aren't really looking that stable on the horizon, in my opinion, in international affairs. So they might play out like it might be of a more delayed effect, but I think things are trending towards some type of conflict, either with Russia, Iran, or China, or simultaneously. And that will give you a world war scenario, because a lot of these world war situations, they tend to pop off whenever you have like a global hegemon like the United States trying to beef with a lot of countries, and when US is beefing with China, Russia, and Iran, that actually creates the conditions for those three countries to actually kind of like click up, if you will, and build their own like rival bloc. You kind of see that already with the so-called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China alignment that's grown in prominence in recent years.
Yeah, let's not forget South Africa and five other nations that are part of
Yeah, South
that.
Africa too. Yep, the
Yeah,
S. Yep, yeah.
yep, and that's the thing that we got to pay attention to. I mean, look, this may be frightening for some of you, but I'd rather be a frightened, informed person than a happy idiot that's gonna be ambushed with a bomb, blowing me up to smithereens. I'd rather be fearful with the knowledge I have. I'd rather be a happy, ignorant idiot that all of a sudden a bomb hits and then I'm scared for my life. I'll probably have a trauma that's gonna last for almost forever. I mean, a little dramatic, but I'd rather be an informed individual so I can be alert and know what to do, as opposed to just, I don't know, bury your head in the sand or just live in La La Land. This is not Disney, people. This is not Disney Fantasia crap, people. Wake up! It's not feeding delusion, people. Wake up, okay? I know I sound like alt-right to some of you, but you gotta pay attention to these things. These things impact us one way or another. It's not obvious, but we gotta pay attention to these things. And I'd rather keep you informed than scared, rather keep you or instead of just keeping you like a happy idiot. I'd rather be an informed, scared individual than the happy idiot that's not aware of anything. Maybe that's why you people not stressed out. Maybe that's why I'm growing a little bit of white hairs. Oh well, I'd rather be alert and alive. All right, so that's what I'm going to say about that. And you know what? Anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
I think that's all on my end for the most part.
Okay, my listeners and viewers, my high IQ people, check out Jose Nino. He does got a podcast, and some topics he dives into are actually fascinating. And it's not from a left right perspective. I've listened to 2 episodes and some fascinating stuff. He got all kinds of people in there talking about different issues. Some are controversial. You're thick skinned, you're intelligent. You don't let childish emotions ruin your thinking, right? You don't let it, just make you afraid or make you cry crybaby because you're hearing different opinions. Just because of different opinions doesn't mean it's not true. People will have different opinions. I mean, what do you want? Everyone to believe the same thing? That's an authoritarian government. Or you're forced to believe the same thing. All right. Okay. Well, let's just say an alternative universe, China somehow dominates America. You want a Xi Jinping puppet there? If you say the wrong thing, you're screwed. You better have the right opinion, okay? You want that? You want that? Huh? Huh? No, people with different opinions, as annoying as it is, that's a much better system than having a government telling us you got to believe in this and that. Big belly Buddha's God. Okay. You don't got to learn Chinese. Okay. And if you don't, you'd be exterminated. You'd be treated like the Uyghurs. Okay. Way worse. All right. So I know different opinions are annoying to some of you, but this is America. America, we got all kinds of opinions. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. But I'd rather deal with this than having everyone believe the same thing because you're forced to, or else you're going to be screwed. And social credit score, they track all your purchases. You buy a certain thing, you buy something that's pro-American, anti-China. Oh, can't do that. Ban, that's that transaction. Can't do it. You're a bad person. You want that? Okay. Slowly coming here. We need to fight against that, but that's a whole nother beast for another day. So check his stuff out, all right? Jose Nino Unfiltered, all right? That's a Substack. I'm going to link it there. It's El Nino Speaks. That's the podcast, all right? And what else I want to share with you? Check out Twitter. I refuse to call it that. That stupid letter. Bad on Elon Musk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Twitter. I'm going to keep saying Twitter, okay? Check it out.
I'm with you. Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say about that. Now for my shameless plug-in. Like, comment, subscribe. When you subscribe, hit the all notifications bell if you want to get all the updates. And then if you have extra green, donate. The minimum is $3 a month to get access to all my old episodes. If you want to if you want to insult my embarrassing old work, I got to hurt your wallet a little bit. A fair trade, right? So check that out. And when it comes to Apple Podcasts, only reviews I'm watching, give an honest review. Well, what made this episode good? Be specific and be thoughtful on your review. Or the more brave question, what made it bad? Okay? Or you can't stand the host. I'm fine with it. Just put it there. Trust me, I've got some negative comments and it's okay. I mean, can it hurt you a little bit? Yeah, but there's techniques to heal from that. And if you can't heal for that, then get a therapist or get a specialist. All right. And then that's all I got. And I gotta say, hit 100 subscribers on YouTube. Continue to grow. I'm surprised I've been able to hit that milestone, but hey, that's a small one. I'm happy about that. Let's see if we can reach 500. Come on. Bring your friends and family in there. Share. Social people needs to hear about this. All right. Now to the final part. Whenever you complete this visual or audio journey, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.